Some stories are inspiring, like a Denver restaurant turning plate scraps into compost on site, or recycling centers using AI to sort waste faster and cleaner than ever before. Some can be really frustrating, like food that's perfectly good ending up in the trash because of a confusing date label, or maybe state lawmakers refusing to pass laws that would make recyclability actually work. And some are just really disturbing, like the fact that up to 70% of our waste or our e-waste electronics is exported to countries where it poisons communities and workers who dismantle it by hand. So welcome to Environmental News, the good, the bad, and the ugly. This series dives into the biggest wins, sad failures, and some uncomfortable truths about how we handle waste in America and what that means for your health, your wallet, and our planet. So I'm Stacy Savage, aka the Texas Trash Talker. I'm your zero waste expert and recycling nerd of 22 years. I'm founder and CEO of Zero Waste Strategies, an environmental consulting firm specializing in waste reduction for businesses, local governments, and institutions. This week, I'm bringing you real stories from across the country on recycling, food waste, and tossed electronics, and we'll cover what's working and what's not. Also, stick around till the end for some action steps and some free resources so that you can get involved and stay informed. As we go through each segment topic, I'm going to give the good, the bad, and the ugly for each. These are current and highly relevant news stories from across the US. Now, let's get into it. For starters, we're going to talk about recycling. So, you may know that when we throw something in the blue bin, the recycling bin, it's assumed that it's handled, but that's really far from the truth. In reality, US recycling rates are stuck in the past, low recovery rates, high contamination rates, outdated systems. And this segment is going to explore where recycling is finally getting smarter, where it's still kind of flailing and failing, and who's standing in the way of real progress. So, for this category, the good is AI powered sorting. So, the US recycling rate stands at about 32% today, with a 50% national goal by 2030. But how in the world are we going to make that big of a leap in just 5 years? Enter AI. So this is cutting edge systems like AMP robotics and Gray Parrot. They use deep learning vision to spot and remove contamination items like glass shards and plastic bags and greasy pizza boxes. And it's demonstrating up to 40% more accuracy than humans on the sorting lines. These smart material recovery facilities, we just call them MRFs in the recycling industry, they not only boost recyclable output, but log real-time data on these waste streams. And this is helping cities forecast needs, optimize routes, and slash collection costs. The bad is that we have import reliance, and the Texas deposit refund proposal or legislation that was introduced in this session. So here's a little context and background for you. So despite high demand for recycled resins, think your plastics, the US actually imports about 30% of its recyclable materials. We're paying other countries to send us trash, guys. So Texas A&M researchers argue that a deposit refund system, so think a refundable recycling deposit for plastic bottles and metal cans, many states across the country have these types of bills already on the books. Some of them have been in action for 20 years. Think about Michigan and Hawaii and other states that have these really effective bottle return bills, right? But in Texas, we've actually pushed this bill 6 legislative sessions, and we're not there yet. So this take back or this deposit refund system could double the in-state collection rates and cut our import bills by hundreds of millions annually. So these deposit return systems require statewide legislation, new infrastructure, retailer buy-in, and it faces pushback from beverage giants who fear the logistics headache and the costs. So there was a bill here in Texas. I'm in Austin. I'm a lifelong Texan. There was a bill that was introduced this legislative session that moved further through the legislative process than any other bill like it had before. So, unfortunately, the clock ran out on this legislation and it did not get brought to the floor for a discussion or a vote. But believe me, as someone who has been in the Texas bottle bill fight for a very long time, this bill will definitely make a comeback in the 2027 session. Yes, the Texas legislature only meets every odd year and only for 5 months. So it usually takes us at least 3 sessions to get good legislation through to actually become law. And for this topic, the ugly is that, we're looking at plastics lobbying versus New York's EPR bill. So here's a little background. New York's 2025 S 1464, which is called the Packaging Reduction and Recycling Infrastructure Act, would require producers to cut plastic packaging by 30% over the next 12 years and fund recycling programs. But there has been an industry firestorm. So petrochemical interests like the Chemical Council, they've spent about $2 million to derail this process. They've been running ads claiming that it would spike food prices and hurt BIPOC communities. So there's been independent analysis that shows laws like EPR or extended producer responsibility, and these would otherwise be known as producer takeback laws. It reduces local pollution and delivers net public health gains, especially in overburdened neighborhoods. So what's at stake? At its core, this battle is about who pays for the plastics problem and whether environmental justice wins or loses in the halls of power. Now, moving on to segment 2 for food waste reduction. Did you know that America wastes more food than any country on earth while millions go hungry every single day? It's not just an environmental issue. This is a moral travesty, folks. Food waste is a top contributor to climate change because when food rots in a landfill, it puts off massive amounts of methane and carbon dioxide. In fact, landfills are one of the top 5 global climate gas emitters, and collectively, it costs business and households billions of dollars every year. So, in this segment, we're going to look at who's leading with bold solutions and why food is still ending up in landfills and what's stopping systemic change that we need. For the good, there's the restaurant food waste revolution. So, the US food service industry generates 17.2% of surplus food. But leaders in Colorado and beyond, they're turning their food scraps into miso and ash salt and biodigester powered compost, which cuts landfill waste by up to 60%. So, a quick spotlight, for example, is Denver's Populous Hotel. They're using an on-site LFC biodigester that transforms plate scrapings into liquid feedstocks for local farms. And this dramatically reduces hauling costs and methane emissions. This also supports the local farmers with a high quality, nutrient dense amendment for their soils that they grow their crops in. So in turn, customers who buy that produce from them will put a higher quality food on their family's plates. The bad is America's 74 million ton food waste problem. So for some context, in 2023, the US generated 74 million tons of surplus food. That's 31% of all supply, yet only 2% was donated. The rest just headed to landfills. So here are some core barriers perpetuating the US wasted food problem. Number one is lack of infrastructure for businesses and their ability to donate. Unless you have a local food rescue group that's willing to pick up your company's excess foods, it's really difficult to get it over to communities that are actually in need. So there's a lot of companies that will use local food banks, but some areas like here in the city of Austin, we've got a nonprofit organization called Keep Austin Fed, and they do food rescue and redistribution. So there's a lot of food banks around the country that are easy to access, but you have to contact them as your business has to contact them first and set up an account so that the logistics can be planned for food donations. And you can't just show up to the food bank and dump off 5 trays of lasagna from your catering event last night. Like that's not how it works. So you have to be able to plan ahead and work with these organizations. But you have to look into your local ecosystem to see what distribution networks are out there and if you can get involved in that. Number two, which is a really big one, is liability fears. Do y'all remember back in the 80s when food businesses were really fearful that if they did donate food, they would be held responsible if someone got sick? Well, not anymore. Since 1996, the U.S. Good Samaritan Act has protected food businesses from legal repercussions when they donate foods. And now those businesses that are donating can get a tax credit for those very donations. It's a win-win. Keep food waste out of landfills, keep your climate gases down, feed hungry communities, and get money in return to recoup what could have been what would have possibly been wasted had you just dumped it in the dumpster out back, right? So everybody wins in that scenario. And then the third one is something that you and I can really tackle together. It's consumer habits. So did you buy too much on a normal shopping trip, which just kind of sits in your fridge and rots away? Maybe you went into panic buying mode in a perceived emergency and it's all gone bad. Maybe it was a misunderstanding about those date labels, which we'll address in the next story. So all of these issues keep edible food from ever reaching hungry people, which are usually children and the elderly. So here's the ugly, date labeled confusion and policy gridlock. So for a little bit of background, there's over 80 US bills have sought to standardize the sell by versus the best by versus the use by labels, and only 9 have passed. So this causes real world impact. A Consumer Reports survey found that 50% of people discard foods based solely on date labels on the packaging. And even when it's still safe to consume, that's millions of pounds of avoidable waste every single week. So one major thing to note here, those date labels on food packaging are for the grocer, your grocery store. That's how they know that the product's peak date of freshness from the manufacturer. Those dates are not there to tell you and me as consumers when to toss the product. The federal government does not require any date labeling on any food product except baby formula. So, without national standardization on date labeling, household waste remains the largest single source of food loss in the US. So, our next segment is going to be tackling electronics recycling, or what we call e-waste. We upgrade our tech constantly, but do you ever wonder where those old phones and laptops and cords actually go? Most of it ends up polluting communities far from where it was used and often under very dangerous conditions. So just do me one thing. Google e-waste dumping in Nigeria. And you're going to see some pretty eye-opening photos and videos, documentaries that you can watch about how rich countries dump on poor countries. So in this segment, we're going to expose the dark truth behind U.S. e-waste exports and highlight programs doing it right and show you how to be part of the solution. So the good is community e-waste collection events. So ERI has a 2025 spring and summer tour in Tennessee, New Jersey, California, and Colorado. And they offered free drop-off e-waste recycling. It's funded by state grants and LG partnerships. So the outcome of this is that each of these events collects tons of old phones and laptops and cords, keeping these hazardous materials out of landfills and boosting local refurbishing and materials recovery businesses. When we keep these valuable materials out of landfill and they are put back into the economy, we create well paying green jobs with dignity. We're not dumping overseas on other countries that have poor worker standards or environmental standards. We're keeping our materials hyper local so we can put our local community to work. That's why producer take back is so important. That's why, uh, keeping these materials and these products back into the system instead of dumping them is so critical. So the bad is an $81 billion market that's only partially clean. So the US e-waste management market reached 81.3 billion in 2025, and that's up 16% year over year. The problem is that despite these booming revenues, only a fraction of electronics are properly recycled domestically. Many of those devices still end up in undocumented exports or mixed municipal trash. And as you're probably already aware, e waste is highly toxic. It contains heavy metals like lead, mercury, and arsenic, but they also contain precious metals such as gold and silver. And it's really critical that e waste of all types is diverted from landfills or dumping overseas due to the toxicity of the products and the high value recoverable materials. So let's get to the ugly uncontrolled e waste exports and Basel gaps. So, the Basel Convention, which is a United Nations treaty designed to control the transboundary movement of hazardous waste, especially from wealthy countries like the US to poor countries like Nigeria. It also ensures that such waste is managed in an environmentally sound manner. Get this. As of June 1st, 2025, the Basel Convention amendments require prior informed consent for all e waste shipments, but the US is not a party. Why? The United States actually joined 188 countries in signing the Basel Convention, but we are the only country in the world that's never ratified it. So it's not legally binding to the US on these rules. So many US companies often engage in e waste exports that would be illegal under the Basel Convention had we ratified it. And it's they're relying on cheaply sending electronics to countries with unsafe or unregulated recycling practices. So there's a major consequence with this. Without binding US ratification, unregulated exports to these countries continue. And the workers often dismantle these products in unsafe, informal backyard work pits, and it exposes the laborers to those toxic heavy metals like lead and mercury and toxic fumes from the burning of the plastics. They burn these huge piles of e-waste to get them down to a manageable level, but it also puts off major plumes of toxic smoke. So, this week, we've seen breakthroughs in AI cleaning up your recyclables, biodigesters turning scraps into solutions, e-waste community events reclaiming value, but we've also learned about some serious hurdles. Money that distorts policy, millions of tons of food wasted while people go hungry, and toxic waste traveling abroad. Now it's your turn to act. So here are some action steps for our viewers. You can try drop-offs for e-waste collection. Find your nearest e-waste collection event in your local community. Maybe even your company is going to host an e-waste drop-off event so they can do recycling for you. If they don't, encourage them to do so, right? You work there. Also, to compost your kitchen scraps. Even a simple countertop pail will help cut methane, and it feeds your garden. So you can also save the containers. This is, of course, getting behind and supporting or lobbying for a refund deposit program in your state for bottle and can recycling if you don't have one already. So if you're at work, you can host an e-waste drive. If you, want to work with your managers to audit your company's cafeteria. Maybe talk with the kitchen staff to understand what's happening to business food waste. You could, um, you know, inquire if the company could install an on-site biodigester or maybe arrange a contract for compost pickup. Talk to your managers, talk to your executives, and see where they stand. And then encourage management, or if you are a manager, talk to your executives, your higher ups about cleaning up your supply chain. If your company makes and sells products, you want to make sure to push your vendors to use recyclable or compostable packaging. Now, as a regular everyday citizen, you can back EPR legislation. You can sign petitions for good environmental legislation in your city or state that requires manufacturers to take back and responsibly recycle their own products for US consumers for free. You can also demand date label reform. So call your lawmakers and tell them to pass a national food date labeling act. And then also you can call your federal representatives and senators for Basel ratification. Urge the US EPA as well to ratify the Basel Convention agreements and its amendments to stop toxic exports. And if you want even more zero waste intel, you can subscribe to my Substack for daily and weekly deep dives into these types of issues, especially centered on zero waste and business activity. You can check out my company's monthly business newsletter for business waste reduction solutions, green marketing hacks, and case studies. Or if you want to just head over to Kindle and look for my book called The Zero Waste Family. It's for busy families that provides practical tips to slash your trash and save money without adding more stress. And it teaches the kiddos a thing or two about good sustainability habits. So until next week, let's champion the good, challenge the bad, and dismantle the ugly. I'm Stacy Savage, aka the Texas Trash Talker, signing off.